Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back to my reading journey. Hope you're all doing great. And today we're gonna finish the story that called "A Ghost of a Chance." Yeah, exactly. So let's just do this. It's a final part. Terence sent a smile of pleased congratulation toward his mother. Attainment was Mrs. Kinsolving's at last, and he loved to see her happy. I suppose I ought to be ashamed to confess, said Mrs. Belmore, who was now enjoying her breakfast, that I wasn't very much disturbed. I presume it would have been the customary thing to scream and faint all and have all of you running about in picturesque costumes. Picturesque costumes. But after the first alarm was over, I really couldn't work myself up to a panic. The ghost retired from the stage quietly and peacefully after doing its little turn and went to sleep again. And I went to sleep again. Nearly all listened, politely accepted Mrs. Belmore's story as a made-up affair, charitably offered as an offset to the unkind vision seen by Mrs. Fish Simpkins. But one or two perceived that her assertions bore the genuine stamp of her own convictions. Truth and candor seemed to attend upon every word. Even a scoffer at ghosts, if he were very observant, would have been forced to admit that she had, at least in a very vivid dream, be honestly aware of the weird visitor. Soon Mrs. Belmore's maid was packing. In 2 hours, the auto would come to convey her to the station. As Terence was strolling upon the east piazza, Mrs. Belmore came up to him with a confidential sparkle in her eye. I didn't wish to tell the others all of it, she said, but I will tell you. In a way, I think you should be held responsible. Can you guess in what manner that ghost awakened me last night? Rattled chains, suggested Terence, after some thought, or groaned. They usually do one or the other. Do you happen to know, continued Mrs. Belmore with sudden irrelevancy, if I resemble any one of the female relatives of your restless ancestor, Captain Kinsolving? Don't think so, said Terence with an extremely puzzled air. Never heard of any of them being noted beauties. Then why, said Mrs. Belmore, looking the young man gravely in the eye, should the ghost have kissed me, if I'm sure it did? As I'm sure it did. Heavens! Exclaimed Terence with wide wide-eyed amazement. You don't mean that? Sorry, guys. You didn't mean. Sorry, you don't mean that, Mrs. Belmore. Did he actually kiss you? I said it, corrected Mrs. Belmore. I hope the impersonal pronoun is correctly used. But why did you say I was responsible? Because you are the only living male relative of the ghost. I see. Unto the third and fourth generation. But seriously, he did it. How do you know? How does anyone know? I was asleep. And that is what awakened me. I'm almost certain. Almost? Well, I awoke just as. Oh, can't you understand what I mean? When anything arouses you suddenly, you are not positive whether you dreamed or, and yet you know that. Dear me, Terence, must it dissect the most elementary sensations in order to accommodate your extremely practical intelligence? But about kissing ghosts, said Terence humbly. I require the most primary instruction. I never kissed a ghost. Is it? Is it? The sensation, said Mrs. Belmore, with deliberate but slightly smiling emphasis. Since your seeking instructions is a mingling of the material and the spiritual. Of course, said Terence, suddenly growing serious. It was a dream or some kind of hallucination. Nobody believes in spirits these days. If you told me the tale out of kindness of heart, Mrs. Belmore, I can't express how grateful I am to you. It has made my mother supremely happy. That revolutionary ancestor was a stunning idea. Mrs. Belmore sighed. The usual fate of ghost seers is mine, she said resignedly. My privileged encounter with a spirit is attributed to lobster salad or mendacity. Well, I have at least one memory left from the wreck. A kiss from unseen world. Was Captain Kingsole a very brave man? Do you know, Terence? That was that little gangster. Terence. He was licked at Yorktown, I believe, said Terence, reflecting. They say he skedaddled with his company after the first skedaddled with his company after the first battle there. I thought he must have been timid, said Mrs. Belmore absently. He might have had another battle, asked Terence dully. What else could I mean? I must go and get ready now. The auto will be there in an hour. I've enjoyed Clifftop immensely. Such a lovely morning, isn't it, Terence? On her way to the station, Mrs. Belmore took from her bag a silk handkerchief and looked at it with a little peculiar smile. Then she tied it in several very hard knots and threw it at a convenient moment over the edge of the cliff along which the road ran. In the room, Terence was giving some directions to his man, Brooks. Have this stuff done up in a parcel, he said, and ship it to the address on the card. The card was that of a New York customer. The stuff was a gentleman's costume of the days of '76, made of white satin with silver buckles, white silk stockings and white kid shoes. A powdered wig and a sword completed the dress. And look about, Brooks, added Terence a little anxiously, for a silk handkerchief with my initials in one corner. I must have dropped it somewhere. It was a month later when Mrs. Belmore and one or two others of the smart crowd were making up a list of names for coaching trip through the Catskills. Mrs. Belmore looked over the list for a final censoring. The name of Terence Kingsolving was there. Mrs. Belmore ran her prohibitive pencil lightly through the name. Too shy, she murmured sweetly in explanation. Yeah, I was right. That was this little gangster, Terence. Alright, guys. Thank you for joining me today and see you tomorrow on the next video. Don't miss it. Bye.